Welcome to the Alphagenix Podcast, where every week we talk to incredible guests from around the world of biohacking, well-being, men's health, and more. Here's your host, co-founder of Alphagenix, Ross Tompkins.
Right. Hello, watchers and listeners. As you can see, I'm not Ross Tompkins. Once again, I've been asked to step in to take his place. My name is Dr. Max Draper. I'm the lead clinician at Alphagenix, the better looking version of Ross, I would hope to be able to say. And today I'm absolutely delighted to welcome back Ali Gilbert, a good friend of mine from over in Florida, America, and the queen of men's health. So hi, Ali.
What's up? It's very brave of Ross to leave us alone.
I know, yeah. The good-looking two of the trio, I guess it would have been. So
yeah, I'm not sure what he thought, what he was getting into leaving that, but we will make him proud and probably embarrassed.
Yeah, well, hopefully we'll get some good information for people as well as all of myself. But so, how would you? Obviously, I know you from last year when we met at the Silverback Summit, and we'd spoken online even before that when I sort of delved into the world of TRT and men's health. And in the first episode, you went into how you got into, being the queen of men's health and talking about TRT and things. But what would you describe what you do now, if you see what I mean, in a general sense?
Yes, I'll give you the very brief version for the listeners who may not know who I am and why I'm some random chick talking about dudes. So I own a coaching business called Silverback Coaching by Ali G, and I've been a fitness professional for over 20 years now. So we specialize in getting guys jacked and lean and healthy and help facilitate the discussion surrounding hormone optimization so that it's not scary, so that they're paired up with competent practitioners. And basically it's like a triangular approach. So we got hormones, nutrition, and training for our approach to coaching. So dialing all those three in usually leads to guys feeling, looking, and performing their absolute best. So
yeah, absolutely. That's basically, you've described my last 2 years of life, really.
yeah, it does hit. And, a lot of guys really, they understand what testosterone replacement kind of is, but it has so many stigmas attached to it that if they do go to the first doctor that they find on Google, that might not be the best fit for them. And then whatever they're told, they're going to believe and not resist, just because they may not have the educational background to provide information that says otherwise, or they just don't know. So what I try to do is help kind of educate guys as to the questions they should be asking and point them in the right direction. Being fitness professionals, obviously we can't prescribe medications. However, I do have a network of professionals through Silverback, through the summit, as you mentioned. And a lot of those guys help do testosterone the right way, I would guess. And you guys being in the UK, I can direct our UK clients over to you guys. And everyone can be on the same page, and it allows for a lot better experience, because if I send you somebody and I'm like, hey, Max, this is how we have so-and-so eating, and this is what we're going to do with his training, you know that you don't have to talk about that with them. And it actually saves more time for you to cover the hormone piece so that everything kind of blends together and works synchronistically. Is that a word?
There is a word. There's a word there. Yeah, there's
a word. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think the beauty of it is, and you always talk about this, even at the summit, everyone was really hammering this home, was TRT, the hormone side of it doesn't work by itself. So, you talked about the trio there, the triangle, nutrition, exercise. It's, if you're covering two aspects of it, well, then you've already, you've won 2/3 of the game almost, in essence. And then if you do end up going to see someone who knows what they're doing when it comes to treating hormones, then you can kind of get pretty wonderful results, can't you? Like you said, you can make life-changing alterations to how someone looks and feels.
Mm-hmm. And, guys think that testosterone will either do a lot of negative things, or they think that it's going to solve all their problems. And like you mentioned, it does not work alone. So whether you're on TRT or not, you actually have to handle those lifestyle things, like as your diet and sleeping, and are you getting sunlight? Are you moving? Do you have body fat to lose? All those things have to be handled for the best experience on TRT.
Mm-hmm.
So
Well, one thing you mentioned quite a lot online is you mentioned it there about debunking the myths around TRT and the fears. When you speak to your clients, because obviously I probably get a different story from them by the time they see me, the physician. What do they commonly think are the scary bits? Is it the sort of classic prostate, the heart, that sort of thing? Is it those sort of classic myths, or
yeah, it's mostly that. It's also, the unknown. It's actually the thing that comes up a lot is the fact that it's a lifelong commitment.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize that initially when I started with this years ago. And I was like, I don't understand the problem. And I think with men, obviously relying on something external for the rest of their life is hard to handle. And they feel that they're kind of, you know, defeated in a way, and they feel that they have to succumb to something, that they can't do it naturally, when honestly it's just like any other medication that is improving your quality of life for the rest of your life. And it is a struggle for them, even though you can position it as, if you're on a blood pressure medication that you absolutely need, or some sort of heart medication to keep you alive for the rest of your life, that's no problem. This is like, something that's going to keep you operating and functioning and not make you predisposed to some of those scary things. So I tell those guys, you're actually more likely to have some sort of cardiac event or a cancer, or if you have low testosterone and you continue to live with that. So
Mm-hmm.
that's really one of the bigger things that I realized was more of like a pride thing with guys, where that was a big struggle to wrap their head around. And I'm like, listen, you can go on TRT and you can come off, and it doesn't mean that you're going to keel over the next day. You're just
Mm-hmm.
not going to feel as good. And, guys are apprehensive about that. So it's kind of talking them through that process and making them realize that this, on top of all the lifestyle stuff, can really be a game changer for all the things they describe, such as the low energy, the fatigue, the irritability, the lack of, sexual performance, perhaps, or just no drive, like no motivation. They're like, I'm just really like meh all day. And I don't want that for them. So that's what they're mostly dealing with.
Yeah, the lifelong commitment. I always kind of say it to guys as like, realistically, if it works and you're responding to it, then if you stop it, the best you can hope for is going back to where you were before you went on it. And I suppose the potential risk if you're on it for a long time is your body's got worse at making it itself. It's kind of like any system that you switch off for a long time. Yeah, I never really thought about it that way. It's actually the long-term commitment of it.
Mhm.
I remember Ross said to me that he felt that he didn't talk about it for a long time. And he said this on the podcast before, because he felt like as a man, you shouldn't rely on something to be manly. I don't know if that's the
Yeah.
right terminology. Yeah.
No, I
Yeah.
think that's a good analogy. Yeah.
Yeah. It never bothered me, to be fair, because I was in such a bad place when I went on TRT. It was like, I didn't really have a choice in this situation.
A
Yeah.
lot of guys are shy about it, and I encourage them to be upfront, because the more that they talk about it openly, especially if there's someone who works with people where you're in the service industry, maybe you're a physical therapist, you are a doctor, you're someone like me who works with fitness professionals and I used to train in person. Talking about it openly normalizes it, but also people are like, "Oh, you're on it. Okay." Like, if they trust you and what you're doing, and then they realize that you've been on it for however long, and then you've not had no issues, then they're more likely to really buy into that. Not that we're trying to convince people, but more educate them as to why this might be the right decision and the right path. And there's nothing wrong about that.
It's nuts, isn't it? Because when I'm just out and about, and friends of me, like maybe the husband of me wife's friend will say, "What do you do?" And I say, "I'm a men's health doctor and primarily deal with things like testosterone and TRT." Then they kind of like look at me, go a bit quiet, and then they try and ask me questions like, as in like, so with testosterone, and they've probably, like, I don't know, Googled it before because of how they were feeling, or maybe something was going on sexually or something like that. And it's kind of like, we're probably even less open in the UK, I imagine, than in the US, because I think you guys are a bit more open-minded. I guess we're quite, still quite old-fashioned in some ways, but yeah, it's quite eye-opening because people will start talking to me about it and they'll go, "Oh, what, are you on testosterone?" I'm like, "Yeah, it changed my life. I've been on it for a couple of, good few years now." But you do get those, like you said, being open about it ends up opening up conversations because it's so common, and it's so underdiagnosed. Yeah, that it's quite crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, and a lot of guys just don't know that they have the resource to feel better, and they will, like, they probably looked at you and they're like, "Man, that guy is jacked." And they're like, "I
Hmm.
wanna get like that," you
Yeah,
know?
of course.
So they realize but that is a thing too, where, like, they equate it because it's testosterone and because it comes in a needle primarily, they equate that with steroids. So they're like, "Well, I
Mhm,
don't wanna be a bodybuilder." And I'm like, "Trust me, you won't." But
mhm,
think of the dosage bodybuilders are at, and so that educational side of it and how, like, replacement dosage, there's so many guys that are on TRT that don't necessarily look like they are according to the stereotype, which guys think are just these jacked bodybuilders on stage. So yeah, it can
mhm.
help you add some more muscle and look a certain way, but does not mean you just sit on the couch and inject and then poof, that happens. Like, I'm really sure a lot of my guys would be very pleased if that happened because they're trying to gain muscle even on TRT when they're in the gym at, a few days a week. So it's something that is just so highly misunderstood as to what are the actual expectations for somebody when they go on testosterone, because we're just replacing a hormone that your body's not producing, that you should be biologically producing already. It's not some super physiological dose that's going to catapult you into the Olympia.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. I'm gonna get the people who edit these videos before we send them out to clip that bit where Ali said that I was jacked. So if we can clip it and put it all over social media, she was being deadly honest as well there. So I'm taking
100%.
that.
No
Yeah.
sarcasm detected.
No, yeah, talking about TRT and the effects on physiques and things. So you obviously have a lot of guys who they come to see you or speak to you, and they may end up starting, and you do the GPP for TRT as well, which is kind of for people, is kind of getting people fit and ready for TRT, isn't it?
Yes.
But what are the that's a good thing for people to understand is, what are the physical changes that you see from TRT with your guys? Does it accelerate muscle mass a lot, or is it all still diet and exercise? I mean, it's quite hard it's quite hard to probably weed out because there's so many variables in gaining muscle and losing fat. But do you notice a big change with them?
Yes and no. So I would say, like, it's not like all of a sudden they go on and then, overnight it's like they're huge. So when we get them in a position of being healthy and resilient and their training and everything, it does help augment recovery. So when you're recovered and you can actually train harder, you can push more weight, you can be more intense, then you're allowed to eat more, or you find yourself, can stimulate hunger. So then they'll actually eat enough to support what they're doing in the gym. Then that ends up being where they turn into not a monster, but they turn into a more, I would say, like, shaped, toned is the word, I guess, version of themselves. It's kind of like the polish on top because they were
Mhm.
headed that direction, but they just needed this to kind of facilitate the ability to recover, to feel good, to be able to perform at work and all that stuff. And then a lot of guys actually sleep better, so that helps with recovery. So anything that helps you recover is going to help you push harder in the gym, and then that's going to result in muscle growth. So it's not directly, oh, I inject TRT and then that grows the muscle like Miracle Grow or something. It's really all the variables working together. And the healthier somebody is when they do this, the better it's going to work for them.
Yeah, yeah. So is that the idea behind the GPP, is to get guys to a point at which their body is more accepting of the new level of testosterone? Because that's what we talk about a lot, isn't it? The fact that, if you are inflamed, if you're carrying a lot of body fat, if you're, stressed out, not exercising, when you go on TRT in that state, potentially you're going to be more likely to get side effects. And Dave Lee talks about that as well, doesn't he? You sort of like get your body or act as if you're making this testosterone yourself, I suppose is a way to look at it.
Exactly. So GPP in the fitness industry stands for General Physical Preparation. So the term was actually taken from training athletes. So they would go through a general prep phase, and then they would go through an SPP or a specialization phase for their sport. In this case, the SPP part is for guys to go on TRT. However, I always say that if he's on TRT or not, most men can benefit from this approach, which we take in our coaching, where the first phase is a lot of the things that guys don't like to do, which is low intensity aerobic work, because they think their muscles will fall off.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, trust me, we have plenty of people to prove that that does not happen. However, it makes them a lot healthier. So the more aerobically fit that they are, the better that they will recover from training, the better they will sleep, their blood pressure will come down, their resting heart rate will come down. They'll be able to eat more because their body's like, oh, you're giving me what I need. I can take these protein, carbs, and fats and actually put them towards what they need to be used for, versus the biggest thing if somebody's unhealthy or has body fat to lose is insulin resistance. So the carbs are not going to get in the cells that they need to get in. So they're just going to swim around in the bloodstream. And this is kind of like the very elementary way of explaining it so people can understand it, but your body doesn't utilize it very effectively. So this approach tends to marry a lower carb approach initially to get guys leaner. Does not mean that low carb is what gets everybody lean. However, if your body is in a state where it can't handle carbohydrates, then we're not going to put more carbohydrates into it and then confuse it in a way. So we lower the carbs so that the cells are like, okay, I will start shoving fat in here and then start being able to use that better, and then lower the inflammation. And then as they get leaner, we start to add carbs back in, which is kind of like the ass backwards way of how a lot of people get lean. They cut carbs, cut carbs, cut carbs until they're so small and flat and they just feel like they have no energy. Whereas carbs are actually what give you like the nitrous and the ability to really push hard in the gym. They also give muscles that dense, hard look. But again, this is only if you're in that healthy state. And what does that look like? I tell guys that if they trend towards 15% body fat or lower, that's when the magic happens. So if they're over that, then we want to get that body fat off before we start adding the carbs in and switching to more hypertrophy focused workout, because we do have to get them healthy and lean. Absolutely, that is the best starting place for men to be. And then beyond the SPP phase is usually like what's called the peak phase. But basically, then we'll transition to more strength based work and then cycle strength based and hypertrophy till the end of time. Until, if someone's like, oh, I want to do this event or I have an obstacle race or compete in jujitsu, then the programming can be tailored to that. But typically that is our approach in coaching, where it's really easy, where, okay, what is your body fat? We'll start here. Oh, you're super lean. Okay, we'll start here. And even the super lean guys can benefit from aerobic work. Doesn't mean that they're exempt from doing it. A lot of them can benefit from it because a lot of guys who are fairly lean, if they're not a hard gainer, they've just lived at a very low calorie amount and they have nowhere to go from that. And so they've been trying to get leaner, doing it the wrong way by constantly cutting more calories, adding more exercise on top of that. And we know how the cortisol, the stress hormone, works. That's going to ramp up because it's like, yo, I have no food to work with. So I'm going to increase water retention because I'm stressed. When we have increased water retention, we store water in the same place we store fat. So guys confuse that as to, oh my God, I'm getting fatter. So what do? They cut calories more, they add more activity. And then that vicious cycle continues and they don't get anywhere, when actually we would take training down, focus on rest and restore recovery. Low intensity aerobic work is not intense on the system. It's actually something very calming. Like walking is probably the best thing to lower cortisol. So a lot of walking, maybe something a little more intense. Like I call it Netflix cardio, just mindless. Like you don't have to worry about going through an interval or anything like that.
Mhm.
And then once those adaptations take place, you can maintain that by just sprinkling in some higher intensity work as they go on. So it's not like they're doing aerobic work forever. And that was like the longest tangent answer.
It was a
But
lot.
yeah, it does require explanation because um that's like the journey that a man would take coaching
Mhm.
with us at least, and we've seen it work just so well over and over and over. Like, for example, I had one guy, and I could even send you the photos to pop up, but he was fairly lean to start, but maybe like 18-19% body fat, which can still look kind of lean on a man. And
Mhm.
he was like, I really want to cut. And he had come from a background of eating like 1,500 calories. And I was like, all right, we have to get your calories up before we bring them down again. Cause where are we going to go? Like 1,100 to diet on? Like, that's not fun. So I bumped his calories up, brought them back down. He started leaning out to the point where he was like, I don't know if I can, continue this. I was like, just give me 2 more weeks. I just want to get a little more fat off you. And then I started pumping carbs back in, and he got scared, and he's like, I'm going to gain weight and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, just watch. What did the scale do? It dropped 2 kilos in like 3 weeks. And I was like, this is the magic.
Yeah. So cardio's not bad and carbs aren't bad, but you need to manage them appropriately. Is that fair to say?
Yes, and
Yeah.
it's like I can empathize with clients and patients and all that, when you're watching social media and all these fit pros are like, "Carbs aren't bad," it's like, "Okay," and then you see someone else saying, "Carbs are bad." It is so confusing, but it
Yeah.
is very contextual. Like, carbs are not bad, like, I don't think any carb has, like, committed a murder or anything, but carbs are
Evil intent.
like, they're best used in the appropriate context. So it might not be the right choice for you. It might be the right choice for your friend at this time. Let's get you in a position where now your body loves carbs and then can perform on carbs. And then we get guys to a point where they're eating like cereal and honey and all that stuff just to get the amount of carbs in. But not everybody starts there. So it's important to understand where you are. That's why I'm huge on hiring a coach, not to push my own business, but I have a coach too. You saw him speak, Luke Lehman at Silverback,
Mhm.
because everybody I think can benefit from being guided toward what they want. Because for me to negotiate with myself, like I'd be like, oh man, I went up a kilo. I think I should cut my calories because I'm a psycho and I don't like how I look in the mirror today. Like, no one's really going to say, no, stay on the right path if you're doing this by yourself. So, yes, there's a lot of context. So it can be confusing, but it really makes me so angry with all the stuff out there because it's just so conflicting. And same with testosterone, it's very conflicting. And if you direct people towards someone who knows what they're talking about, like you guys, it's a lot easier.
Well, the problem with the online is it's also bipolar, isn't it? It's like you said, everything is nothing is black and white. There has to be gray by its very nature. It's kind of like TRT is the best thing ever, or TRT is dangerous and deadly. It's like, well, it's good in the right hands is probably the fair way to say it. And then same with carbs, they have a role. Is that cutting and bulking, Ali? Is that what you kind of do, or is that too much of a simplistic term? Because you hear these terms online of cutting, bulking, a lean bulk or a clean bulk, a recomp? Is it, or are they just, is
Yeah,
that just,
I'll
yeah.
explain the difference in those. So the terms cutting and bulking came from the bodybuilding world because during the competitive season when they go on stage, obviously they're very lean and they diet to get there. To get to that point of leanness and to bring the muscle along with it, whether they're natural or not, you have to gain a considerable amount of weight by eating food. So in the off season, bodybuilders look massive. This is why they wear sweatshirts and stuff when they train because it's just there's nothing to show. So they would gain a lot of weight and then diet that weight off coming into their show. Not everyone has to take such an extreme approach. So what we do with guys is a lot of them for us come to us not eating enough for what they're doing. So they may be training many days a week, jujitsu, they're active, and it's just not enough to support what they're doing. So we do increase calories to at least match what their output is. And then if they want to gain muscle, I don't go into these excessive like 5,000 calorie increases. We only add maybe 250 to 500 calories at first, and then they slowly will gain a little bit of weight. It's near impossible to gain muscle without a little bit of fat,
Yeah.
but you can mitigate how much fat by not going crazy with the calories. And a recomp is really adding muscle and dropping fat almost simultaneously, but it's a lot slower process and that
Mhm.
requires a lot of patience, but it can happen. And we do that by keeping protein very high and then slowly adding calories and then maybe doing like a mini cut for a few weeks and then adding calories back up. But there's no such thing as a mini bulk because the process of adding muscle is way more glacial than body fat. Because body fat, you're breaking down, you're catabolizing. So anything catabolic is very quick. Anything anabolic is a lot slower.
Mhm.
Especially if you're natural, it's going to be a very, very, very long process. But guys' bodies can change dramatically and the scale may not even move at all. So
Yeah.
that's cool to see when that does happen. And then like a clean or a dirty bulk is really just referencing the type of food that they eat. So a clean bulk would be like, eating in higher calories without processed foods, without fast food, like all of that stuff. I mean, it really doesn't matter because there is a point like we have had some guys who have eaten above 3,000 calories. If you've ever tried to eat that many calories through real food, it is very difficult. It's like a full-time job. Like a lot of people are like, "Oh my God, I would rather diet than bulk," like myself included, because you're just always eating and it gets so tiring. So you have to add things like cereal and shakes and stuff that maybe isn't real food, but some guys take the dirty bulk to an extreme where they're eating a ton of fast food and candy and all this shit every day just because they don't care because they're like, "Oh, it's calories." Yes, it
Mhm.
is calories. However, you can accelerate the level of body fat that you gain, and it only makes the dieting process more annoying. So that's where that comes from.
Yeah, yeah. So dirty bulk doesn't mean anything sexual. I just thought it was sort of like I'm doing
No.
a dirty bulk.
And
Yeah. So
I would be the first one to make it a sexual thing, but it's not.
yeah, yeah. Fair enough. Yeah. That you the hilarious thing as well is when you're doing your Instagram posts and things like that, you've made comments on wearing is it AirPods in the gym,
Yeah.
um, gloves, working out gloves, and guys who are scared to like eat enough to put on muscle because like you said it's kind of impossible to put on muscle without some fat. And I read those and I was like, literally described me. I was kind of in the gym like with me earpods in, I had me gloves on because I was deadlifting, and I also literally tried to do for a few weeks I was trying to eat more to gain more muscle. And then I saw myself in the mirror and I looked at the scale going up and I was like, I'm done here, man. I'm getting fat. It was like she's literally destroyed my entire last month in one
Oh, no.
post. Yeah. So I'm that guy. So I've stopped using gloves. So now
Good.
I've taken that step. Yeah. I'm still occasionally using the AirPods, and I don't know if I'm necessarily gaining weight or what. I can't quite judge where my calories are at. But I said to Adam Hodgkiss on a podcast I think it must have been a couple of months ago now, the amount, like you said, about the amount of food that you need to eat to get proper, like some of these bodybuilders who are huge, even to gain muscle at my size, and I'm like 90 kilos, and I train 4 or 5 days a week maybe, and do some cardio as alongside weightlifting and things. But you do have to make a conscious effort to eat more, don't you? It's not as easy as or not as pleasant as you'd think. Everyone thinks, oh, I'd love to eat more. But actually, when it comes down to it, eating sort of 5 times a day it does get in the way of life a little bit.
It is like it's like, yeah, we can all eat more of very hyper palatable foods. Like I
Mm,
could crush a bag of Oreos, no problem. But I don't think Oreos have a lot of protein. So when you have a high protein goal, that's going to make you fuller a lot quicker. So it's a chore to get in those calories with the protein goals that most guys have, which is going to be between 2 and 300 grams if they're trying to
mm,
add size. So yeah, I hate bulking, like, and I told Luke, I'm like, I'm done bulking. Like, I don't like it. I think like I'm 56 kilos, and I think the heaviest he got me to before I was like, I can't take it anymore, was 65 kilos. And he was like, come on, let's go for 70. I was like, dude, no. Like,
Yeah.
clothes don't fit. I'm uncomfortable. Like, my abs are blurring out, and now I'm at a weight where I fluctuate between like 56, 59, and I'm happy there because weight also does not just come from fat. It also does come from muscle, but nobody really recognizes or remembers that. Scale goes up, oh, I must be getting fat. However, also inflammation from training. If you're weight training consistently, you're creating inflammation. So your body's going to respond by retaining water. That will make the scale go up. If you start TRT, that's going to make the scale go up. If you ate later than normal the night before, the scale will be up the next day. If you did one of those IV vitamin treatments, that usually adds about a kilo. I've done a lot of those, and I've seen every single time a kilo, and then a couple of days later, it's all gone. So there's so many variables that go into the scale going up that it's only one tool. But I do encourage guys to weigh themselves every single day, because then you see how normal those fluctuations are. So if you only do it once a week, if you weigh yourself, after a rest day, you're going to be lighter. And then if you wait until a week later after a heavy leg day and a lot of food, you may gain like 2-3 kilos and be like, oh my God, what happened in that week? And freak out. So if you were doing it every day, you can see that those fluctuations are normal. And that's what we show our clients too. Like, it's not just the scale, because again, if you're on TRT, that scale is going to go up and your body may change dramatically throughout the process of muscle growth. And then the scale might not even move much. So have to take everything into account.
That's what literally happened to me as well. I hadn't weighed myself for a couple of weeks. I'd been eating more, looked at the scale, and I was like, I put on 2 kilograms. I was like, this is it. I'm getting fat. I can't do this anymore. How does cardio, you mentioned about cardio being generally healthy. Obviously it helps insulin resistance, helps generally just feel better as well. I always find that, jogging, cycling, everything like that actually makes me feel mentally more chill and more, I don't know, happy, I guess, for want of a better word. But does it help with the weightlifting side of it? People talk about interference, not necessarily, you said about how people fear their muscles are going to melt away if they go for a jog, but does it complement it? Or is it a case that both are good and they're kind of separate entities, if that makes sense?
For the average person who just wants to be healthy, gain some muscle mass, gain some strength, it does not interfere. If you are a strength athlete and your sport and career and income source are reliant upon your ability to perform in this sport, then it will detract at a certain point. Like, scientifically, you're supposed to wait a certain amount of time before performing aerobic exercise, so there isn't an interference. It's really not going to happen with, just us regular people. So people do ask, like, well, do I do cardio before or after training? Typically, most people do it after training so that the energy is prioritized to the weightlifting workout. However, there are people that have been doing cardio before they train forever. So your body will adapt to whatever you're doing, and that's okay. If you feel fine and you can still make progress in the weight room and do your cardio before, that's cool. If you want to do it after, that's cool too. If you want to do it later in the day, have at it. Like, it really doesn't matter. I tell guys, like, that and like time of day to work out are things that we really don't need to be worrying about. Work out when it works for you, when it works for your schedule, when you feel the best, whether that's early in the morning, late, whatever. It really does not make that much of a difference. We have way more rocks to hit before we're worrying about that and all that minutia for fitness.
Is that a big online thing as well? Because it's kind of like the idea is that something has to be bad or good rather than everything can be incorporated. And we're all not professional athletes. So what applies to them doesn't apply to Bob, who wants to get fitter, a bit leaner and put on some muscle. It's kind of like if you're an elite athlete, you've got much more specific goals and things like that in mind, and you have to get that, eke out that top 1%. Whereas for the rest of us, get moving more, do exercise. There's much more generalities that we need to tick off first before we worry about the minutiae, isn't it, really?
Oh, 100%. Because, an elite athlete, like, let's compare a cyclist, with like a shot putter, right? Or how about a footballer, soccer player?
Mm-hmm.
I played football in college, soccer. We love aerobics. Like, I love running just because I played soccer for so many years. So if there's sprint work involved in that and there's aerobic work that's involved in that, right?
Mm.
So I can do a mix of both. However, if you have an elite shot putter whose energy system is very quick and it really relies on the short bursts of energy, doing aerobic work is not going to be in his favor and can detract because it's a different energy system than what he's using for shot put. However, if you have 30% body fat and you're worried about doing aerobic work because you think it might take away from your strength work, we have our priorities a little bit flipped. So it's not going to detract in a negative way for the average person. And it's going to help because it will get you healthier, in better shape. We're going to drop the body fat. So there's not going to be a conflict for that average person. It's not something that they're going to need to worry about at all. There was a point I was going to make and then I totally forgot about it, but it might come to me. But the fact that like the general population can't get aerobically fit enough, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So you can literally do as much of it as you want, and it's not going to have a negative impact unless you have a career that is based on training a specific way with type 2 muscle fibers, which are more explosive. Type 1 are the muscle fibers that are worked more in aerobics. So like a marathon runner looks a certain way because they don't necessarily train in a way for explosiveness, for big muscles, because that's not going to help them. Plus, that athlete is also usually built for marathon running. So people with smaller frames and leaner frames do well because they do have more type 1 fibers and they've trained that way. Somebody who's very big and has a lot of power and wants to do shot put, they are built that way and they train to complement what their sport is doing. But for somebody who's just going to the gym, they need to get healthier. You can literally aerobic yourself away and you'll be fine.
Yeah, fair enough. I used to worry about that as well because I saw it online that aerobic exercise, and it was aerobic exercise will kill your gains, and it was actually Luke's presentation at the Silverback, which was like, you need to do cardio, and I was like, okay, so my running's okay. I'm not. That's not the reason I can't squat very much. It's my genetics. Yeah.
Well, he's a perfect example too, because he I think at the time, or he might still be, he says he's training for a duathlon. Well, we have yet to see it actually happen because he's like, I'll do it when I'm ready. But he's only really been biking and running, and you've seen him in person. He's not a small dude.
No,
and pretty jacked, and he hasn't been on TRT in like 2 years just because it's so crazy in Australia. And, he's lazy in contacting Dave Lee, but he looks phenomenal and he has not lost muscle. And he's done literally no strength training other than like body weight work and like a couple sessions here and there, but he hasn't tried to gain more muscle basically. And he's doing so much aerobic work that you would think, oh man, he's just going to melt. And he's not.
Yeah. That was what I said to Ross when we first got to the Silverback Summit. We met you and Luke outside, and I was like, he's big. And then we went into the actual on the day, and I'm not huge, but I feel like I'm quite a big person, and I felt absolutely tiny. And Ross is 6'3". He's bigger than me, and we were kind of like, there's a lot of fit dudes in here. I mean, just looking strong and things. It was quite impressive, really. So it's important to walk the walk, isn't it? So a lot of your coaches and things all look proper. They look in shape. They walk the walk as well as talking.
Yeah, and I think that's important. For brand purposes, but also, I'm not sure somebody would really be as keen to hire somebody who does not represent the lifestyle that this person is searching for. And there's a lot of debate on that. I mean, there's debate on everything online. You can't say anything anymore. Clearly I have made that apparent that no matter what you say, someone's going to get upset and have a problem with it, but I just have to get used to that.
100%. It's difficult line to tread, isn't it? But I think that at the end of the day, you basically talk logical, sensible stuff rather than trying to hit like, this is the headline, you know, cardio's bad for you, fat's bad, or carbs are bad. So lastly, Ali, if that's all right, just how do you go about getting guys motivated to hit the gym, hit exercise up? Because what I find is that particularly if they have low testosterone, obviously their motivation and drive and energy can be difficult, and then you kind of hope that the TRT inspires, you know, something in that situation where you think, well, okay, this might give you some energy, it might help your motivation, it might make you feel less achy, perhaps, all of these things. But you know, it doesn't always happen. But is there a way you know, with your clients where you just think, right, let's do this? Do you have any sort of tips for people watching for motivation?
Motivation's a tough one because it's really not something that can be taught. However, we're not afraid to be direct and transparent with our clients, right? So we will lay out the ramifications of not doing what they need to do. And that's not like us scolding them, because that's just like part of the process. If you don't get your training done, we're going to be like, yo, what's up? But what the impact of not doing any of this has on their family, on their personal health, and kind of paint that picture of their future to let them know that this is what you're looking at if you don't confront this now, because we cannot want it more than you. You have to come into our coaching wanting this, wanting to do the work. We will guide you. We can't do the work for you, but we can do everything possible to make sure that you are on the right path to get it done. Because if you have somebody that you have to check off the workout and hit done, and we get that notification, and if we don't get that notification, that's not hurting us, that's hurting you. So if you're happy paying us for not doing anything, we will take your money. That's fine. I'm okay with that. I'm not really okay with that, but you know what I mean? So that kind of helps highlight, and we do price ourselves in a way where people will pay attention. Like, it's not a $10 a month membership at a gym that if you don't go, it doesn't really hurt your wallet that much. This is an investment in your entire health, in the future, and in everything. Your business will flourish. Your ability to perform as a dad, as a husband, as whomever is going to increase. Maybe you're in pain all the time and it's just been aggravating and you can't work as much. You can't perform at work. You can't make money. Well, if we are able to get you out of pain and feeling good, you can allocate all that time and energy into producing at work. And then that helps your family, and then just helps everything. And it's like a cycle of positive stuff. But we can't make you want it more than we want it for you. And that's a big pill for a lot of guys to swallow, because those who are not compliant, and I don't expect people to be absolutely perfect. So we help you with your nutrition. It's not like you have to eat XYZ every single day. We actually let people eat whatever they want. They just have to hit their targets every day. But if they go off on benders, drinking a ton of alcohol, they miss workouts, they're not sleeping, they're not doing what we've laid out for them, they don't want it bad enough. And that is really difficult to hear, but it is the truth. Because say tomorrow, like, you're diagnosed with something where if you don't get a CAT scan that next day, it's a problem. You will cancel everything in your day to make that happen. So are you willing to actually do similar things to where, you know what, I'm not going to go to the pub every single weekend. I'm going to prioritize sleeping and getting some training in. I'm going to prioritize actually focusing on reducing how I react to stress in a negative way. All those things collaboratively will push you forward, but you have to want it bad enough to make that change. And those who are not able to do that, and this can include crazy life events happen, you just don't want it bad enough, because there's never going to be a best time. And, you know, we hear that a lot. Well, when life calms down, I'll start coaching, or when I get past, the next month, because it's a lot at work. And I'm like, how about you start now? Because when you throw yourself in the fire and you can get through it because you have us supporting you through it, then you can do anything. Because continuously waiting, you're going to have events, like you're going to have weddings, you're going to have birthdays. And I am huge on celebrating that and enjoying yourself. But if you use that as an excuse to completely go off the rails, not talk to us, not do anything, then that is when it becomes a habit and it becomes a problem, and it becomes a self-limiting belief of, I can't do this because I have all these things in my life. We have guys who are on a plane every single week. We have guys who work on boats 200 years in Alaska, 200 days a year in Alaska. We have guys who have 5 kids. We have guys who have no kids. We have, people dealing with all sorts of things. So nobody's so special that they can't get stuff done if they don't want it bad enough. So I know that was like, laying the hammer, but I think it's what a lot of people need to hear, but they don't hear, because a lot of coaches, especially younger ones, are afraid, well, if I lay into my client and tell them the truth, they're going to fire me. If they want to fire us because we're literally laying things out how they should be, then we're not a good fit to begin with. So,
well, I think it's helpful to hear as well, because you can apply that to TRT as well by, it's in terms of your coaching. The reason that there's an association with the TRT side of the world is that, you need to be hitting all of these things the most of the time. Like you said, everyone has, off days or whatever, but it's so important to get the most out of life. How you're going to feel, the results you'll get from anything is all about committing to it. And we're all human at the end of the day, but you can't just keep making excuses for the rest of time, because, potentially that tomorrow you're talking about will never come, really, in terms of you'll never get the motivation if you don't just bang, get into it and get it done. Yeah.
Yeah. And when guys come to you and they get their blood work done, sometimes that's the catalyst where on paper, it shows their future bright and clear. And that's what they need to get their shit together to get this stuff done. But that's why I'm big on, everybody walking the walk and being an example. And I've said to people, last year was probably the craziest, most stressful year for my business. And I was probably on the road like 30 weeks a year. And I am the leanest I've been, and I feel the best. And I'm just like, there's ways to navigate this. So maybe you don't hit all 100% of workouts, but if you can hit 90%, and then what can you control when everything's crazy? You can control nutrition. You can't control flight delays. You can't control being stuck in cities. You can't control having to say yes to certain opportunities, because those are things that you actually should do. But you could always control your nutrition, and that will bring you very far forward. You can miss workouts. That's fine. But we still have to control all the other stuff. So life's always going to throw things at you. It's how resilient and bulletproof are you to react to those versus just give in to it. So,
and the irony, well, the circle of that is that if you do get fitter, healthier, etc., sleep better as a result of all of this, get your nutrition dialed in, is you will feel more resilient as well. And that's the kind of the side of it that people often miss out. It's kind of actually, if you get all of this under your belt and get into a good routine, lose body fat, sleep better, exercise regularly, you'll actually feel physically and mentally better. So it's kind of and then you kind of get into the habit of it because it makes you feel good. Absolutely. Yeah. So Ali, where can people, if people have watched this and felt inspired from the chat, where can people find you? Your socials, your coaching, that sort of stuff.
Hit me up on Instagram at the Ali Gilbert, ALI. Slide in the DMs. Happy to answer any questions. There's a link in my bio to apply for coaching. There's also a link to the Silverback Summit if anyone would like to attend. It's not just for medical and fitness pros. We had a fair amount of guys that were enthusiasts about men's health. So if you want to learn more about what I was talking about today, more about the TRT world and the people that Max and I are associated with, that is the place to be. Plus, we have a lot of fun. That can be found in my bio as well. So that's really the best place.
Yeah, I highly recommend it all. The Silverback Summit last year was the best conference I've been to in my life. It was brilliant. And everyone's really nice. Everyone's really nice and enthusiastic. It was very useful.
I didn't pay him to say that at all, I promise.
No. And right, well, take care of yourself, Ali. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Max.
Take care.
Thank you for listening to the Alphagenix Podcast. Make sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss next week's episode. For more resources on Alphagenix and men's health, visit alphagenix.co.uk. Until next time.